Ambassador Zixada floated in the center of the great hall, her crystal body shimmering with fear and desperation. Around her sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy, representatives from dozens of worlds that made up the Galactic Council. Their faces showed pity, but nothing more. "Please," Zixara whispered, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "My people are dying. The Krex Empire has already destroyed 3 of our 7 worlds. They turn our cities to ash and our oceans to poison. In 2 months, they will reach our homeworld. We need help." The Altarian delegate, a tall blue being with 4 arms, shook his head slowly. "We feel for your suffering, Ambassador. But the Krex Empire is too strong. They have weapons that can crack planets, ships that number in the thousands. No one has ever defeated them." "Then we are all doomed," Zixara replied, her crystal form growing dimmer. "If they finish with us, who will be next? Your worlds? Your children?" Silence filled the hall. Everyone knew she spoke the truth, but fear held them back. The Krex had ruled through terror for over a century. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. Entire species had vanished under their advance. The Centauri representative, a small furry creature, spoke softly. "Perhaps if we offered them tribute, resources, technology, workers, maybe they would spare the Veltar worlds." "We tried that," Zixara said, her voice breaking. "They took our gifts and burned our cities anyway. They said we were too weak to deserve life, that only the strong should inherit the stars." Hours passed as the council debated. They spoke of economic sanctions, diplomatic protests, and emergency aid. But no one mentioned military action. No one offered to fight. Finally, the council president, an ancient being from the core worlds, spoke. "We will send medical supplies and food to your remaining worlds. We will also file a formal complaint with the Krex government about their aggressive actions." Zixara felt her hope die. Medical supplies would not stop the Krex war fleets. Complaints would not save her people. "That is all?" she asked. "I am sorry, Ambassador. The Council cannot risk open war with the Krex Empire. We must think of the greater good. The greater good." Zixara had heard those words many times before. They always meant the same thing. The strong would survive while the weak died alone. She left the council chambers and returned to her small ship. With trembling hands, she activated the emergency transmitter. It was an old device, barely functional, but it could send signals. Across vast distances, she programmed it to broadcast on all frequencies in all languages known to the Galactic database. "This is Ambassador Zixara of the Veltar Coalition," she spoke into the transmitter. "My people face extinction. The Krex Empire brings death to our worlds. If anyone can hear this message, if anyone has the courage to help, please respond. We have technology, resources, knowledge to trade. We only ask for the chance to live." Message went out into space, carried by invisible waves to every corner of the galaxy. Most who received it would delete it immediately. Some would feel sad for a moment before forgetting. But maybe, just maybe, someone would answer. Far away. On a small blue world at the edge of the galaxy, the message reached Earth, Captain Jake. Morrison sat in his office at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, reading reports from the morning patrols. Earth had been quiet lately. No alien visitors, no strange signals from space. Most humans still believed they were alone in the universe. The communication officer, Lieutenant Betty Adams, knocked on his door. "Captain, we picked up something strange about an hour ago."
"Oh, looks like an alien transmission."
8.
Jake looked up, interested. Earth had been monitoring space for decades, hoping for signs of other life. Another false alarm? "I don't think so, sir. This one is different. It's on multiple frequencies and translated into hundreds of languages. Someone really wanted it to be heard." Jake followed Betty to the communication center. The large room buzzed with activity as technicians analyzed the strange signal. On the main screen, images flickered. Burning cities, fleeing crowds, massive ships dropping bombs from the sky. "My God," Jake whispered. "It's real." Dr. Alex Turner, the base's science officer, looked up from his console. The signal came from the Vega sector, about 26 light-years away. Whoever sent it is desperate. Jake watched the images again. The aliens in the message looked fragile, like living crystal statues. Their cities were beautiful, full of light and graceful curves. But the attacking ships were dark and brutal, designed only for destruction. Can we respond? Jake asked. Theoretically. Yes, Dr. Turner replied. But it would take years for a message to reach them, even longer for us to get there. Admiral Lisa Kane entered the room, having been called from her meeting with the Joint Chiefs. She was a tough woman who had worked her way up through the ranks during Earth's various conflicts. What do we have, Jake? Jake played the message again. Admiral Kane watched in silence, her face growing grim. How far away are they? 26 light-years, ma'am. With our fastest ships, it would take about 8 months to reach them. They said they have 2 months before these Kreks reach their home world. Yes, ma'am. Admiral Kane studied the tactical display showing the alien star system. What do we know about this Kreks empire? Nothing from our databases, Dr. Turner admitted. This is first contact with multiple alien species. We're completely in the dark. Commander Ryan Bell, the base's strategic officer, spoke up. Ma'am, if I may, these aliens are asking for help. They're facing genocide. Maybe we can't save them, but we could try. With what? Admiral Kane asked. We have 12 deep space-capable ships. No idea what we're facing. No knowledge of alien technology or tactics. We have something they might not expect, Commander Bell continued. Earth weapons are designed for Earth conditions. High gravity, extreme weather, constant warfare. Maybe that counts for something. Jake nodded. The message mentioned they would trade technology and resources. Even if we can't defeat this Kreks empire, we might learn something valuable. And we'd be making contact with alien civilizations. Admiral Kane was quiet for a long moment. Earth had always been isolated, watching the stars and wondering if anyone was out there. Now they knew the answer. Not only was someone out there, but they needed help. Prep the Defiance and her escort ships, Admiral Kane finally said. Full combat loadout. If we're doing this, we're going in ready for anything. Ma'am, Jake said. Permission to command the mission. Admiral Kane looked at him. Jake was one of their best officers, experienced in both space combat and first contact protocols. Granted. Pick your crew and prepare for departure. You leave in 72 hours. As the team scattered to prepare, Dr. Turner approached Jake. Captain, you realize this could be a one-way trip. We don't know what's waiting for us out there. Jake looked at the images still playing on the screen. Families running from burning homes, children crying in their parents' arms. It reminded him of old Earth wars, of humanity's darkest moments when people had to choose between fighting and dying. Someone answered when Earth needed help, Jake said. Maybe it's time we returned the favor. 3 days later, the UES Defiance led a small fleet away from Earth. Behind them, the blue world grew smaller until it was just another star. Ahead lay the unknown, danger and aliens, who had begged the stars for aid. They had no idea they were about to meet humanity. 8 months of travel through the dark between stars had tested everyone aboard the UES Defiance. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the ship's corridors, checking on his crew. The 5 human ships had held together well, but everyone felt the weight of their mission. Chief Engineer Kate Phillips looked up from her console as Jake entered the engine room. We're running at 90% efficiency, Captain. It's not bad for 8 months of hard burn. Any problems with the weapon systems? Jake asked. All green, though I still think we're crazy for trying this with chemical rockets and nuclear warheads. Jake smiled maybe, but it's what we have. On the bridge, Tactical Officer Ben Hayes monitored the long-range sensors. Captain, we're picking up something. It's multiple contacts bearing 270. Jake settled into his command chair. Put it on screen. The main display showed 5 alien ships moving in perfect formation. They were sleek and dark, with weapon ports glowing red along their hulls. Even from a distance, they looked dangerous. Those must be Kreks ships, said communications specialist Tony Martinez. They're heading toward the inner system. Distance. Jake asked. 30,000 kilometers in closing. They've detected us too. They're changing course to intercept. His heart rate increased. This was it. Its first contact with a hostile alien species. All ships, battle stations, raise shields, and charge weapons. The Krex patrol leader, Commander the Kmal, studied the strange ships on his screen. They were ugly things, built like metal boxes with chemical thrusters sticking out the back. Primitive. Beyond belief. Unknown vessels came a transmission in broken galactic standard. "We are from Earth. We come to help the Veltar people," Dekmal laughed. Earth. He had never heard of such a world. These creatures must be from some backwater planet at the edge of nowhere. Primitive species you have entered Krex space without permission. Turn around or be destroyed. The human ships kept coming. "I repeat," the Kmal transmitted. "Leave now, or face the consequences." Still no response except the steady approach of the boxy ships. Dekamal had dealt with dozens of species during his career. They all reacted the same way when faced with Krex. Power, they begged, they cried, they offered tribute. None had ever ignored his warnings. "Fire a warning shot," he ordered. "Show them what Krex weapons can do." The patrol ship's main gun charged and fired. A beam of pure energy lanced out toward the lead human vessel. It struck the ship's hull and exploded in a brilliant flash. When the light faded, the human ship was still there, scarred and smoking, but still moving forward. Dekmal stared at his screen. The energy beam should have vaporized that primitive craft. No ship built with such crude technology should have survived. "Impossible," whispered his weapons officer. "No one builds armor that thick." On the Defiance, emergency lights flashed as damage reports came in. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Chief Phillips. The main structure is intact. We can take a few more hits like that." Medical officer Dr. Susan Clark was already treating the injured crew members, burns and broken bones from the impact, but nothing fatal. "We're lucky their weapons are energy-based. Our armor was designed to stop kinetic projectiles, but it works against this too." Jake opened a channel to the other human ships. "All vessels, commence attack pattern Alpha. Target their engines and weapon systems." The human ships moved with purpose. They were slower than the Krex vessels, but they maneuvered like fighters. Instead of the large ships they were, years of combat in Earth's gravity well had taught human pilots to think in 3 dimensions, announced Ben Hayes. Nuclear-tipped missiles launched from the Defiance's tubes. The other human ships followed, sending dozens of warheads toward the Krex patrol. Commander the Kmal watched the primitive missiles approach. The ship's point defense systems could easily stop such crude weapons. Laser turrets swiveled and fired, detonating the missiles one by one. But there were so many of them, and they kept coming. "Evasive maneuvers," the Kmal ordered. But his ship was designed for overwhelming firepower, not agility. The humans had launched their missiles from multiple angles, boxing in the Krex formation. 3 nuclear warheads slipped. Through the point defense, they detonated against the patrol ship's shields, sending waves of radiation and electromagnetic pulse through the vessel. Lights flickered as systems overloaded. "Shields at 60%, reported the engineering officer. "What kind of weapons are those?" "Atomic fission devices," answered the science officer, disbelief in his voice. "They're using nuclear explosions as weapons." "What kind of monsters would develop such things?" The Kmal had never encountered weapons designed to irradiate and burn. Civilized species used clean energy beams or particle weapons. Only savages would contaminate space with radioactive fire. The human ships pressed their attack. More missiles launched, followed by streams of metal projectiles fired from magnetic railguns. The Krex shields, designed to stop energy weapons, offered little protection against solid matter traveling at incredible speed. "Return fire," the Kmal ordered. All weapons, full power. Energy beams lashed out at the human ships. Most missed, as the primitive vessels rolled and twisted in ways no civilized ship would attempt. Those that hit caused damage but failed to penetrate the incredibly thick armor. "Sir," called the communications officer, receiving a transmission. "From the humans, let me hear it." A voice spoke in accented Galactic standard. "Krex ships, this is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. Surrender now, and we will not harm your crews. Continue fighting, and we will destroy you." The Seamal felt rage build in his chest. No one had ever demanded his surrender. The Krex Empire ruled. Through fear and strength, these primitives dared to threaten him. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel. Show them the price of defying the Krex Empire. 5 energy beams struck the Defiant simultaneously. The ship's hull glowed white-hot as energy poured into its structure. Inside, crew members were thrown against bulkheads as the vessel shook. "Hull temperature critical," reported Chief Phillips. "But the armor is holding. These earth metals are tougher than anything they've seen." Dr. Clark moved through the ship, treating injuries as fast as she could. "We need to end this fight soon. We can't take much more punishment." Jake made his decision. All ships, ramming speed. Target the largest Krex vessel. "Sir." Ben Hayes looked shocked. "Ramming, you heard me. Full power to engines. Prepare for collision." The human ships accelerated toward the Krex formation. To Commander Thekmal, it looked like suicide. No sane species would ram their ships into an enemy. The destruction would be total for both vessels, but as he watched the crude human ships bear down on his patrol, he realized these beings were not sane by galactic standards. They were something else entirely. "Evasive action," he screamed. "Get us out of here. Too late." Now the human escort ship Ranger struck the Krex patrol vessel amidships. The collision tore both ships apart in a ball of fire and metal. But the sacrifice opened a gap in the Krex formation. The remaining human ships poured through, their weapons firing continuously. Without the protection of formation, the individual Krex ships found themselves surrounded and outgunned. One by one, they fell too. Nuclear fire and kinetic projectiles. Commander Thekmal's ship was the last survivor. His crew was dead or dying, his weapons offline, his engines failing. As the human ships closed in, he sent a final transmission to the Krex Fleet Command. "Known species from a world called Earth," he gasped. "Not civilized. They use atomic fire. And ram ships like berserkers. They fight like demons from the void. Warn the fleet, warn everyone. The Deathworlders have come." The transmission ended as the UES Defiance finished off the patrol ship with a concentrated missile barrage. Jake looked at the wreckage scattered across space. They had won, but at a cost. Good people had died in the collision. Communications. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we made contact with hostile aliens. Request immediate reinforcements." "What about the Veltar?" asked Tony Martinez. Jake studied the tactical display showing the route to the inner system. Somewhere ahead, the crystal beings who had sent the desperate plea were fighting for their heiress. "Lives against the full might of the Krex Empire." "Set course for the Veltar worlds," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed. We have people to save." As the human ships moved deeper into alien space, word of their victory spread ahead of them. The Krex Empire had been bloodied by unknown primitives from an uncharted world. For the first time in over a century, someone had fought back and won. Galaxy was about to learn what happened when you cornered a species that had evolved in hell. The human fleet approached the 4th planet in the Veltar system. From space, New Veltara looked like a giant jewel floating in the darkness. Cities of crystal and light covered the surface, connected by bridges that sparkled in the sunlight. But even from orbit, Jake Morrison could see the damage. Dark scars crossed the planet where Krex bombs had fallen. Several cities were nothing but ash and broken glass. "Captain," said communications specialist Tony Martinez, "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet. Multiple sources, all on the same frequency. Put it through." The bridge filled with voices speaking in harmony. Not one person, but hundreds, all thinking together. The sound was beautiful and strange at the same time. "Known ships," the voices said in perfect English. "We felt your battle in the outer system. We felt your pain when your people died. Who are you?" Jake had never heard anything like it. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your call for help." Silence filled the channel for several moments. Then the voices returned, filled with wonder. "You came. After all this time, someone answered our call. Please, land at the coordinates we are sending. Our people wish to meet you." Dr. Susan Clark looked amazed. Captain, I think they're telepathic. They knew about the battle before we told them. They felt our crew members die. That explains how they're all speaking together, Jake said. Get me a shuttle ready. I'm going down there. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos stepped forward. We don't know if it's safe. This could be a trap. Jake shook his head. They asked for our help, Maria. If we don't trust them, why did we come all this way? An hour later, Jake's shuttle touched down in the central plaza of Sylveth New Veltara's capital city. The buildings around them rose like frozen music, all curves and flowing lines. Everything was made of the same crystal material, but it came in every color imaginable. The Veltar people gathered to meet them. They stood about 6 feet tall, their bodies made of living crystal that shifted color with their emotions. Right now, most were showing deep blue, which Jake guessed meant sadness or fear. One of them stepped forward. Unlike the others, her crystal body was clear like diamond, and she moved with obvious age and wisdom. I am Elder Sylvan, she said, speaking aloud instead of telepathically. We honor your arrival, humans of Earth. Jake bowed slightly. Elder, we came as soon as we could. But I have to ask, how do you know our language? We touched your minds during the communication, Elder Sylvan explained. We learned your words, your thoughts, your feelings. Forgive us. But it was necessary for us to understand you quickly. Doctor. Clark stepped forward. You said you felt our battle. You knew when our people died. Yes. Your species burns very brightly in the telepathic realm. Your emotions are strong, your thoughts clear and focused. When your crew member died ramming the Krex ship, we felt his sacrifice across the star system. Jake felt a chill run down. His spine? You can read our minds? It's only surface thoughts, and only when you allow it. But we felt something else from your species, something that frightens and amazes us. Elder Sylvan's crystal body shifted to a mixture of blue and gold. You have no fear of death. Your people choose to die for others without hesitation. We have never encountered anything like it. Chief Petty Officer Steve Brooks, who had come down with the landing party, looked around at the beautiful city. Elder, this place is incredible. But we saw the damage from orbit. How many of your people have the Krex killed? The colors in Elder Sylvan's body darkened. 3 billion on the outer worlds. The Krex do not simply conquer. They destroy everything. That does not serve them. Our people, our art, our history, all turn to dust. Why don't you fight back? Asked Lieutenant Colonel Santos. We cannot, replied another Veltar, approaching the group. I am Kalen, keeper of our histories. My people evolved on a world of peace and plenty. We have never known war, never developed weapons, never learned to hate. When the Krex first attacked, we tried to defend ourselves, but we could not bring ourselves to kill, even to save our own lives. Jake tried to understand. You mean you physically can't fight? Our minds reject violence, Kalon explained. To deliberately harm another being causes us pain so intense that most Veltar would rather die than inflict it. We can defend with shields and barriers, but we cannot attack. Dr. Clark was taking readings with her medical scanner. Fascinating. It's like they evolved without aggression entirely. No fight-or-flight response, no territorial instincts. Most species in this galaxy are similar, Elder Sylvan continued. They evolved on gentle worlds where cooperation was more valuable than competition. War exists, but it is rare and limited. Nothing like what you showed us in your memories. Jake frowned. What do you mean, what you saw in our memories? When we touched your minds, we saw glimpses of your world. Your Earth, Elder Sylvan's crystal form shifted to deep red, showing strong emotion. Such violence, such struggle. Your entire history is war and disaster and death. How do you bear it? It made us strong, Jake said simply. Every challenge we faced, we adapted. Every threat we encountered, we learned to overcome. It's pleasant, but it's who we are. Kellen moved closer, his crystal body now bright with curiosity. In our records, we have found references to worlds like yours. The ancient texts call them Deathworlds, planets, so hostile that any life evolving there would become incredibly dangerous. Dangerous how? Dr. Clark asked. Your planet has extreme weather, natural disasters, predators that hunt in packs, diseases that kill in days. Any species surviving such conditions would develop traits that peaceful worlds never need. Aggression, adaptability, the willingness to sacrifice for the group. Steve Brooks looked around at the perfect crystal city. I wonder the Kreks are. Winning? They're the only ones mean enough to fight dirty. Not exactly, Kalon said. The Kreks evolved on a harsh world as well, though not as extreme as yours. They developed technology and weapons, but they use fear and overwhelming force to win.
Ow.
They have never faced opponents who match their aggression. Jake was beginning to understand. You're saying most of the galaxy is like you? Peaceful, cooperative, unwilling to fight? Yes. And that is why the Galactic Council could not help us. They have the weapons to stop the Kreks, but they lack the will to use them. They hope that if they submit, the Kreks will be satisfied and leave them alone. But they won't. Lieutenant Colonel Santos said. Elder Sylvan S. colors turned dark blue. Again, no. The Kreks believe that only the strong deserve to live. They will continue conquering until someone stops them or there is nothing left to conquer. Jake looked up at the sky where his ships waited in orbit. 4 vessels against an empire that had conquered 17 star systems. How big is the Kreks fleet heading this way? Our scouts report 300 ships, Kellen answered. They carry weapons that can crack planets and armies numbering in the millions. They will arrive in 43 of your Earth days. The human landing party exchanged glances. 300 ships. Even with reinforcements from Earth, they would be outnumbered 50-1. Dr. Clark spoke quietly. Captain, maybe we should evacuate as many Veltar as possible. Our ships could carry thousands to safety. No, Jake said firmly. We didn't come here to run away. We came to help. Elder Sylvan's crystal body flared bright white with surprise. You cannot be serious. You are brave. But this is not bravery. This is suicide. Jake smiled. Elder, let me tell you about human history. We've faced impossible odds before. Sometimes we lose, but sometimes we find a way to win. And when do we change everything? He turned to look at the beautiful crystal city, thinking about his crew in orbit and the impossible task ahead. Besides, someone has to show the galaxy that the Kreks can be beaten. This might as well be us. For the first time since the landing, Elder Sylvan's crystal body showed a color Jake hadn't seen before, a warm golden light that seemed to pulse with hope. Tell us, she said, how do Deathworlders fight? 43 days. That was all the time they had before 300 Krek ships arrived to finish what they had started. Jake Morrison stood in the war room aboard the UES Defiance, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Veltar system. Report, Jake said to his officers. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos stepped forward. We've been training Veltar civilians in basic survival tactics. They can't fight, but they can hide, evacuate, and provide support. About 50,000 have volunteered. To help however they can, Chief Petty Officer Steve Brooks added, I've been working with their engineers. Their shield technology is incredible, but their weapons are basically non-existent. We're trying to adapt our missile systems to their power sources. Dr. Susan? Clark looked up from her medical reports. The Veltar have been sharing their telepathic abilities with us. It's limited, but some of our crew can now sense basic emotions and locations. Could be useful in combat. Tactical Officer Ben Hayes brought up the system display. Long-range sensors show the Kreks fleet is still 36 days out. But Captain, even with everything we're doing, 4 ships against 300 is impossible. Odds. Jake nodded grimly. He knew the math. But he also knew something his crew didn't yet understand. What did you learn about Kreks tactics, Ben? They use overwhelming force in direct assault. No subtlety, no clever strategies. They just bring so many ships that resistance becomes pointless. It's worked for over a century. Because no one has ever made them pay a real price, Jake said. They've been fighting civilians and pacifists. They don't know how to handle an enemy that fights back hard. Elder Sylvan entered the war room, her crystal body glowing with nervous energy. Behind her came Kellen and several other Veltar leaders. Captain Morrison, We have studied your military history as you requested. Your species has a concept we find both terrifying and inspiring. What's that? Jake asked. You call it Pyrrhic victory, winning at such great cost that the victory becomes meaningless. But you also have another concept. Fighting so fiercely that your enemy decides the price of defeating you is too high to pay. Jake smiled. You've been studying our guerrilla tactics? Yes. Your Vietnam War, your Afghan conflicts, your resistance. Movements during World War II, small forces defeating larger ones by making conquests too expensive to maintain. Kalan stepped forward, his crystal form showing bright blue determination. We cannot fight as you do, but we can make the Krek's victory cost them everything. Our cities can become traps. Our people can disappear into hidden shelters. Again, when they try to occupy our worlds, they will find nothing but empty shells. That's the idea, Jake said. But we need to hit them where it hurts most first. The main display changed to show intelligence gathered by Veltar scouts. The Krek's fleet was massive beyond anything Jake had ever seen. Hundreds of ships stretching across space, carrying enough firepower to destroy entire planets. But Jake noticed something. Ben, look at their formation. What do you see? Ben studied the display. Standard Krek's assault pattern. Heavy battleships in the center, cruisers on the flanks, support vessels in the rear. They're protecting their command ship in the middle of the formation. Exactly. They put their most important vessel in the safest place. That tells us something about Krek's psychology. Dr. Clark understood first. They're bullies. They've never faced an enemy willing to take heavy losses to reach a target, right? And bullies have a weakness. They fold when someone hits back harder than expected. Elder Sylvaness' crystal body shifted to worried purple. Captain, surely you're not planning to attack their command ship directly. That would be suicide. Maybe. But if we can take out their leadership, the rest of the fleet might retreat. At minimum, we'll throw them into confusion. Lieutenant Colonel Santos pulled up tactical scenarios. Even if we could reach their command ship, how do we destroy something that size? Our missiles won't penetrate their heavy shields. Jake looked at the display showing the UES Defiance and her sister ships. Earth vessels built tough and crude, designed to survive anything the universe could throw at them. We ram it. The Veltar leaders stared at Jake in shock, their crystal bodies flashing through confused colors. Sir, Ben Hayes said carefully, ramming a ship that size would destroy us completely. Not all of us, Jake replied. One ship, maximum damage. To their command structure, the rest of the fleet continues the fight. Captain Dr. Clark protested, there has to be another way. Jake shook his head. Sometimes there isn't, Susan. Sometimes the only way to win is to sacrifice something precious. He looked around the room at his officers and the alien allies who had become friends. But that's not the only part of the plan. He activated another display showing the Veltar defense grid. While we're hitting their command ship, you'll be implementing the Deathworld doctrine down here. The what? Asked Kalen. Something every human learns growing up on Earth. When something bigger and stronger tries to kill you, you make yourself too dangerous to eat. Jake pointed to locations across the planet. Hidden weapons caches, booby traps, false surrenders, followed by suicide attacks. We're going to turn this beautiful world into a nightmare for any Kreks who try to occupy it. Elder Sylvan's crystal form turned deep red. Captain, you're asking us to destroy our own cities. I'm asking you to make them too expensive for the Kreks to hold. Every building they enter could explode. Every street could be a trap. Every surrender could be an ambush. Jake's voice grew hard. You said you can't kill, but you can set up situations where the Kreks kill themselves. Steve Brooks was running calculations on his tablet. We'd need to wire the entire city with explosives, remote detonators, timer systems, motion sensors. It would take weeks. We'd have 36 days, Jake said. And we have thousands of Veltar volunteers. Over the following weeks, new Veltar transformed. The beautiful crystal city remained gorgeous on the surface, but underneath, a web of destruction waited. Explosive charges were hidden in buildings. Support's weapon caches were buried in parks and gardens. Emergency shelters became command centers linked by hidden communication lines. The Veltar, despite their peaceful nature, threw themselves into the work with desperate determination. They could not fight directly, but they could prepare the battlefield. Meanwhile, Jake's crew prepared for their own mission. The 4 human ships were loaded with every explosive device they could carry: nuclear warheads, kinetic penetrators, even chemical explosives from the ship's emergency supplies. Dr. Clark worked with Veltar medics to set up field hospitals in the underground shelters. "Captain, I want to go with you on the command ship." "Attack. Susan, I need you here. The Veltar will need medical support when the fighting starts." "With respect, sir, you're going to need a medic more than they will. This is a suicide mission." Jake looked at his friend and chief medical officer. "That's exactly why you're staying behind. Someone needs to survive to help put the pieces back together." 3 days before the Krex fleet arrived, Jake called his senior staff together one last time. The war room was crowded with human officers and Veltar leaders, all focused on the final preparations. "Status report," Jake said. "All charges are in place," reported Lieutenant Colonel Santos. "The city is ready. When the Krex land, they'll walk into a maze of traps. Communication systems are hidden and hardened," added Steve Brooks. "Even if they destroy the main transmitters, we can coordinate from the underground networks." Ben Hayes pulled up the space-based tactical display. "Our ships are ready for the attack run. All weapons loaded, all systems checked. The Defiance is carrying enough explosives to crack an asteroid." Jake nodded. "Veltar status." Elder Sylvan spoke for her people. 50,000 volunteers are in position. Civilian populations have been moved to the deep shelters. We are as ready as we can be. Remember, Jake said to everyone in the room, the goal isn't to win a traditional victory. It's to make the Krex pay such a high price that they decide. Conquest isn't worth it. We're going to teach them what happens when you attack a death world. Kelani's crystal body glowed with determination. "Captain, there's something else you should know. We've been broadcasting everything to the rest of the galaxy. Every species under Krex rule, every world considering surrender, they're all watching." Jake felt the weight of that knowledge. It wasn't just about saving the Veltar anymore. It was about showing the entire galaxy that the Krex Empire could be resisted. "Then we better put on a good show," he said. 2 days later, long-range sensors detected the approaching Krex armada. 300 ships moving in perfect formation, enough firepower to glass entire continents. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiance watching the enemy fleet grow larger on the main screen. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. They knew what was coming. "All stations report ready, Captain," announced Ben Hayes. "Very good. Signal the fleet. Begin attack. Run." The 4 human ships accelerated toward the massive Krex formation. Behind them, New Veltar awaited in deceptive silence, its crystal cities gleaming in the starlight, supreme. Admiral Vexthera of the Krex Empire watched the approaching human vessels with amusement. For tiny ships against his entire armada, it would be over in minutes. He had no idea he was about to learn why the galaxy feared Deathworlders. Supreme Admiral Vexthera watched the 4 human ships approach his massive fleet. 300 Krex vessels against 4 primitive craft. It would be the shortest battle in Imperial history. "All ships maintain formation," he commanded. From the bridge of his flagship, the Doom of Worlds. "Let them come closer. I want to destroy them with a single volley." The human ships flew straight toward the center of the Krex formation. No evasive maneuvers, no clever tactics. Just a direct assault that looked like madness. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the human ships are accelerating. They're on a collision course with our formation." "Collision course?" Vexthera frowned. "Are they trying to ram us?" "It appears so, sir. But at this distance, we can destroy them long before they reach us." Vexthera had heard the reports from the Outer System Patrol. Human ships with impossibly thick armor, weapons that used atomics, fire crews willing to ram their vessels into enemy ships. But seeing it himself was different. "These creatures are insane," he muttered. "All ships, open fire. Destroy them." Energy beams lanced out from 100 Krex ships. Space around the human vessels filled with deadly light. But the 4 Earth ships kept coming, their crude hulls absorbing punishment that should have vaporized them. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, alarms blared as energy weapons pounded their ship. Jake Morrison held onto his command chair as the vessel shook under the assault. "Hull integrity at 60%, reported Chief Engineer Kate Phillips over the com. "We can't take much more of this. We don't need to," Jake replied. "Ben, how long until we reach the command ship?" Tactical Officer Ben Hayes checked his display. 30 seconds, Captain. Their point defense systems will activate any moment. All ships prepare for final acceleration. Launch all missiles on my mark." The human fleet split apart, each ship targeting a different section of the Krex formation. Dozens of nuclear-tipped missiles launched from their tubes, followed by every explosive device they could carry. Supreme Admiral Vexithera watched in horror as atomic fire bloomed across his fleet. The human missiles were primitive, but devastating. Ships that had conquered star systems found their shields overwhelmed by raw nuclear force. "Evasive action," he screamed. "Break formation." But the Krex fleet was too large and too tightly packed. Ships collided with each other as they tried to avoid the human attack. The perfect formation that had intimidated dozens of species became a liability. The UES Defiance flew through the chaos, heading straight for the doom of worlds. Jake could see the massive command ship growing larger on his screen. It was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons and thick armor. "Captain," Dr. Susan Clark called from the medical bay, "I'm reading massive damage throughout the ship. We won't survive impact." "That's the point, Susan," signal the other ships. "Tell them to continue the mission without us." Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos appeared on the bridge, having abandoned her post to be with the crew in their final moments. "Captain, it's been an honor serving with you." Jake looked around at his bridge crew. These were good people who had volunteered for a mission they knew was suicide. "The honor was mine. All of you." The doom of worlds filled their entire view now. Point defense lasers fired desperately, trying to destroy the approaching ship. But the Defiance was built to survive. Earth's harsh conditions, it would not be stopped. 10 seconds to impact, Ben Hayes announced. All hands brace for collision. Jake opened the ship's communication system. "Hi, this is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. We came when you called for help. Remember us." The UES Defiance struck the doom of worlds at full speed. The explosion could be seen across the entire star system. Supreme Admiral Vexithera died instantly as his flagship broke apart. The command structure of the Krex fleet died with him. Across the Armada, ship captains found themselves without orders, without coordination, without leadership. The remaining 3 human ships pressed their attack. Commander Ryan Bell, now in charge of the small fleet, led them against the confused Krex vessels. Nuclear missiles and kinetic weapons tore through ships designed to intimidate. It's not to fight opponents willing to die for victory, but the battle in space was only the beginning. Krex. Ground forces landed on New Veltar, despite the chaos in orbit. Thousands of soldiers in powered armor deployed from massive transports, expecting to face the same helpless civilians they had slaughtered on other worlds. Instead, they found empty cities. Colonel Thrakmer led the first wave into the Crystal capital. His soldiers moved through beautiful streets that should have been full of terrified civilians. Instead, they found silence. "Where are they?" he growled into his communicator. "The entire population can't have vanished." His answer came as an explosion tore through the building beside him. Hidden charges detonated throughout the city as motion sensors detected the Krex advance. Soldiers who had conquered 17 star systems found themselves trapped in a maze of booby traps and hidden weapons. Underground. Sylvan coordinated the defense from a hidden command center. She could not fight directly, but she could. Triggered the traps that human engineers and Veltar volunteers had spent weeks preparing. "Section 7 is clear," reported one of her assistants. "The Krex are moving into the market district." "Activate charges in buildings 12 through 20, Elder Sylvan ordered. "Force them toward the central plaza." Above ground, Colonel. Thrakmer watched his soldiers die in ways he had never imagined. Every building could explode. Every street could collapse. Every room could be filled with poisonous gas or hidden weapons. "This is impossible," he radioed to his commanders. "The Veltar are pacifists. They don't fight." "Maybe not," came a voice on the emergency frequency. "But humans do." Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos emerged from a hidden tunnel with 50 Veltar volunteers. She carried an Earth-made rifle and enough explosives to level a city block. The Veltar with her couldn't fight, but they could guide her to where the fighting needed to happen. The battle for New Veltara lasted 3 days. Every street became a battlefield. Every building became a fortress. The Krex used too overwhelming. Weak opponents found themselves bleeding soldiers for every meter of ground in space. The surviving human ships continued their hit-and-run attacks. Commander Bell had learned from Jake's sacrifice instead of direct assaults. He used the confusion in the Krex fleet to strike at supply ships and isolated vessels. Chief Petty Officer Steve Brooks, now commanding the UES Ranger, developed new tactics on the fly. "Target their fuel ships," he ordered. "Make them choose between fighting and getting home." By the 4th day, the Krex forces on New Veltara were trapped in a nightmare of urban warfare they had never experienced. Casualties mounted with no end in sight. The beautiful Crystal City had become a death trap. Acting Fleet Commander Zorak Tel, the highest-ranking Krex officer still alive, faced a decision no Krex leader had ever confronted. His empire had always won through superior numbers and technology. But numbers meant nothing when the enemy was willing to sacrifice everything for victory. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Other species are broadcasting reports of our ... difficulties. Some of our subject worlds are talking about rebellion." Zorak Tel stared at the tactical display, showing his shattered fleet. Half his ships were damaged or destroyed. His ground forces were trapped on a planet that fought like a living weapon. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species were watching his empire bleed. For the first time in Krex history, retreat became the only option. "All ships prepare for withdrawal," he ordered. "We're leaving this system." "Sir, what about the ground?" "Forces." Zorak Tel looked at the planet below, where his soldiers were still dying in the crystal streets. "They're lost. Signal the retreat." The Krex fleet began to pull back, abandoning their troops and their conquest. As they fled, a message broadcast across the galaxy. Ambassador Patricia Lee, speaking from Earth, addressed every species under Krex rule. "This is Earth," she said. "The Krex Empire has been defeated at New Veltara. The Deathworlders have shown that tyrants can be stopped. Any world that wants freedom, any species that chooses to fight, Earth will stand with you." Within weeks, rebellions erupted across Krex space. Worlds that had submitted in terror now remembered that resistance was possible. The empire that had ruled through fear began to crumble as fear turned to hope. 1 year later, Captain Jake Morrison was remembered across the galaxy as the human who changed everything. Earth had gone from an unknown world to the leader of a new alliance dedicated to freedom and mutual defense. Elder Sylvan stood in the rebuilt central plaza of New Veltara, now called Morrison Square. A monument to the human captain rose in the center, made of Earth steel and Veltar crystal combined. "Begged the stars for aid," she said to the gathering of humans and aliens who had come to remember the battle. "And the Deathworlders came. They showed us that even the smallest light can drive away the darkness if it burns bright enough." In the crowd, Dr. Susan Clark wiped away tears as she looked up at the monument. Jake Morrison had died as he lived, protecting others and fighting for what was right. But his sacrifice had lit a fire across the galaxy that would never be extinguished. The age of the Krex Empire was over. The age of the Deathworlders had begun.